Hi and welcome to my YouTube channel, and today we are going to learn about some different watercolor techniques. The first thing before we get started painting is we're going to create a tape resist for each of our different techniques. So what you're going to do is I have some 1/2 inch masking tape here and a 9 by 12 piece of paper. I'm going to tape different sections, and you want to have at least 9 different sections for this part. Our first technique we're going to use is wet on dry, and what that is just wet paint on dry paper. I'm going to wet my brush, and you can pick whatever color you want and just activate my watercolors. I'm going to pick a small section for this because it's just going to be a solid color, and you're going to fill in that little block. We are going to do this one twice because we are going to use it for another technique. So pick another box and another color, or you can use the same color. And you're going to paint another one of your blocks. Okay, we'll come back to this one in a little bit after it dries. I'm going to clean my brush really well, just painting the bottom of the bucket. The next one is wet on wet. When you use wet on wet, you're wetting the paper first and putting wet paint on the paper. So I'm going to take a brush with just clean water. Wet my paper. And paint in that section. If you want to use one color, you can even use 2. I'll add a little bit of pink to this one, magenta. And that is wet on wet. Our next one's similar to wet on wet. It's drop color. You're going to clean your brush really gently again. And you're going to wet another section of your paper. And then you're going to pick up a color, whichever color that you like, and you're going to drop little droplets of that color on the wet paper, and it disperses and creates a cool little starburst type effect. Clean my brush. I can pick another color. Depending on how much water you add is how much the colors are going to spread out and disperse. Okay, our next one is going to be a graded wash. This one's kind of hard for me, so it takes a little bit of practice. And what a graded wash is you're starting from your color and it's going to fade out and get lighter and lighter. I'm going to use a dark color so you can see. And I'm going to paint a couple of kind of lines to get me started. And I want that to be a little bit more opaque, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint. Now the next thing you do is you're going to gradually clean your brush a little bit. So I'm going to dip and wipe my brush off a little bit and paint a couple more strokes. Dip and wipe. and just try to blend that color and make it get lighter and lighter. If it's a kind of a harsh transition, you can go back over a little bit and try to smooth it out if you're using watercolor paper. And that's a graded wash. The next technique we're going to do is a wax resist, and I really enjoy using this one with white crayon. You could use any kind of crayon. You could even use an oil pastel, but for right now I have a white crayon. And I'm just going to maybe add a pattern, or you could write your name. And then you can choose some colors that you would like to paint over it. And what happens is the wax of the crayon repels the watercolor, and you can see your pattern. Our next technique that we're going to do is called a dry brush. And you're just going to take, you could either wipe your brush off really good or dry it with a paper towel. And I'm going to pick up some paint and just stipple to create a nice, interesting texture. You could even clean your brush again, dry it off, and add another color if you'd like to. Okay, that one block that we started at the beginning, it should be pretty dry now. We're going to do a technique called glazing. And you're going to pick another color, and you might want to grab a smaller brush. Glazing is when you paint on top of dry paint. I'm just going to maybe add a little pattern on top. You could try a couple different colors to see how those look. The last two are a couple of my favorites. We are going to do plastic wrap. And plastic wrap is, you're going to use plastic wrap to create a texture. If you don't have plastic wrap, you could also use a grocery bag that I recycled and I cut into pieces. What I'm going to do first is paint my block in, and I'm going to use the wet on wet technique for this. The paint has to be wet for the texture to show up. So I'm going to work really fast. And you could put a couple of colors. And I'm going to take my plastic wrap and place it on top, like so. And you have to leave it there and let it dry. The last one we're going to do today is salt. And I have this little, it's just a salt shaker from the grocery store, and it is sea salt. Table salt won't work for this, you have to use sea salt. I'm going to really quickly paint my last block. And you could use a couple different colors if you'd like. And I'm going to take my salt shaker, just twist, and sprinkle the salt on top. This is a good one. This one and the plastic wrap's a good one to wait till last, because you're going to have all this salt on your paper soaking up the paint, and you have to leave your plastic wrap on top and let it dry, and you have to leave the salt on top to let it dry. So I usually wait till the last steps of my painting to do these two. I put my original paper to the side so it can dry. It just needs a little bit more time to dry. But I have a few here that I have made before, and I just wanted to show you what they ended up looking like. So you can see the different techniques here. I have the plastic, the salt. The salt one on this one was a little bit more successful. We have our glazing and our drop color and our wax resist. Made a little bubble pattern here. The last thing to kind of finish up your watercolor sampler is you can even outline the tape resist part and add some patterns to it. So I really like the contrast this creates. And all I have to do is take a Sharpie, and if you have a thick Sharpie and a regular Sharpie, that helps a lot too. Let's do a few extra techniques while I wait on my other paper to dry. We're going to start with blotting. For blotting, you're going to paint with the color that you choose. And I'm going to take either a paper towel or a tissue and just pick up some of that color. It just creates a nice little texture. Blending is kind of like the graded wash, where we can blend two colors together. I'm going to start with my first color and paint part of the box. Clean my brush and pick another color. And paint the rest. And the colors should diffuse together. If you'd like to blend them a little bit more, you can take a clean brush and just kind of gently push the watercolor together and let it dry. We can also create values by mixing a little bit of black with our colors. If your watercolor set has white, you can also make the colors lighter or more opaque that way. Usually to make my watercolors lighter, I just add more water to them, but I am going to show you how to make darker values. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of paint and place it on the edge of my palette here. And then get a little bit of the black watercolor and mix together. And now I have this dark blue color. Just make sure after you've mixed that, you wipe out your palette so you don't close it on top and get those colors mixed in. The last one's really cool. It's a straw technique where you can blow the paint across the paper. So I'm just going to put little dollops of the watercolor. So that's just a few extra techniques you can use in your artwork.